So what we're finding now is that there is this ecosystem effect where if you start to rank for all of these relevant questions that are relevant to the purchase journey, that all of your very short tail, very competitive keywords will start to rank better as well.
Welcome to the Agents of Change, the podcast experience you've been waiting for your entire marketing career. Search, social, mobile, AI, blockchain, and neuromarketing. These are the Agents of Change, and so are you. Digital marketing success awaits, and your transformation begins now.
Welcome to another episode of the Agents of Change podcast, where we help you become the best digital marketer you can be and help you reach and engage more of your ideal customers online. My name is Rich Brooks. I'm your host. This is episode 554, powered by the 10th annual Agents of Change Digital Marketing Conference. Years ago, we had a client here at Flight. Actually, we still have that client. They are a small local provider of a product used in almost every manufacturing plant, regardless of size, regardless of where in the world it is. I'm not going to go into details because it's their story to tell, not mine, but suffice it to say that they are the David in their industry. And yes, they have a Goliath. It's not Amazon, but it's basically the equivalent of Amazon for their industry. They sell this very specific product with 1,000 different customizations, but it's still basically the same product. While this Goliath sells everything that they do, but also a million other things. When we took them on, this Goliath was definitely a concern, especially as Google tends to favor large companies with a big footprint over small businesses that may not be as well known. It's just a fact of life. Well, it worked out great, and our client is still outranking their Goliath for some of their most valuable keywords. It turns out that we were practicing many of the same tactics that we're going to be going over with today's guest. He calls them challenger brands, but you can call them Davids or startups or just small businesses, likely like yours. If you've got a Goliath in your industry, or if you find yourself being outranked by a big competitor, you're going to like what you hear in today's episode. Now, this episode is scheduled to drop on October 2nd, meaning it's the last episode before our 10th annual Agents of Change Digital Marketing Conference. Meaning, this is my last time to let you know about everything you'll miss out on if you don't grab your ticket, whether you buy an in-person ticket for the conference or grab a digital pass. So here it goes. The event is taking place on October 9th, Wednesday. This is an all-day conference with keynotes and breakout sessions, so you can choose your own adventure. We've got 15 digital marketing experts, including John Chance, Kim Garst, Andy Crestodina, Subi Zimmerman. I'll be speaking. The list goes on and on. When you're here, you'll get to listen to industry experts on the customer journey, artificial intelligence, video marketing, conversion rate optimization, social media, and so much more. And if you are able to attend in person, to make it here to Portland, Maine on October 9th, you'll have plenty of networking opportunities with other owners, marketers, and entrepreneurs. Maybe you'll find your next employee, employer, customer, or vendor. If you're not able to attend, you can still grab a digital pass. That will allow you to live stream the main stage all day long and get every session, all the breakout sessions, on demand after the event is over. That's 15 high-quality sessions for only $149, and less if you use my promo code. Yes, if you use AOCP, short for the Agents of Change podcast, at checkout, you can save $25 off every ticket. If you are here in Portland, we come back the very next day on Thursday, October 10th, for our deep dive workshops. These are in-person only due to the nature of the workshops. They're hands-on, it's a small classroom, limited seating, with 6 amazing instructors on topics like Facebook ads, AI, video creation and editing, LinkedIn ads, and more. You are going to get hands-on experience working with these instructors, and you are going to leave with really practical experience that you can take back to your job, back to your company. All the details and all the pricing are available at our website, theagentsofchange.com. Check it out. Check out the agenda, the speakers, the workshops. I hope you can make it. If not, you can grab a digital pass. And don't forget to use AOCP as a promo code at checkout. I hope to see you there. Now, let's figure out what we can do to win the SEO battle against the big dogs in this week's interview. My guest today is the founder and CEO of Merriweather, the e-commerce SEO agency that drives revenue, not just traffic. After starting his career training under a top direct response copywriter, he transitioned to the SEO industry, where he now applies direct response principles to drive profitable SEO campaigns. With multiple seven-figure campaigns under his belt in tough industries like CBD, vaping, and health and wellness, today's guest is the person to call when rankings and revenue are not optional. Today, we're going to look at what you need to do when there's an 800-pound gorilla in your vertical and you're a challenger brand with Josh Piepmeier. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on, Rich. Really looking forward to the conversation.
All right, so I mentioned challenger brand when I was introducing you. How do you define a challenger brand?
I'd say a challenger brand, it's really about the mentality of the owner, but I'll add some criteria myself, right? It's anybody who's sort of the second or third brand in a space. If you think about, there's a concept of being the leader, and there's maybe room for one or two brands in any space, and then anything below them is kind of a challenger, right? So like if you think of cola, it's Coca-Cola, it's Pepsi is sort of number two, and then it's kind of just everybody else. If you think about, I don't know, athletic apparel, this has opened up a little bit, but it's still sort of Nike is number one, Adidas is maybe number two, and then kind of everybody else is after them, right? If you're talking about yoga, it's Lululemon. So anybody who is number probably three in the consideration set for any industry, I would consider a challenger brand. And then you can add some SEO stuff on top of that, right? Like, do you have a strong website or not? But I think that core concept of if you're not necessarily the number one or number two, I consider you a challenger brand.
And obviously, when you mentioned those brands, those are all brands we're really familiar with. I actually did hear the other day that now Dr. Pepper is outselling Pepsi for the first time in US history, but whatever, I get your point. So when you're thinking about it, though, from like a small to medium-sized business that might just be known in your either in your industry or in your geography or both, how might that change the way that you think about a challenger brand? Or is it still the same thing? You're just playing in a smaller sandbox?
I think for the most part, it's the same thing, but you're playing in a smaller sandbox. I guess this is where I would start to layer the SEO metrics on top of this, right? Like, do you have one person that's sort of ranking for all of the keywords in your space, right? For example, in CBD, like we mentioned in the intro, I've done some work there. It can be breakdown by product line. So maybe in the CBG space, which is sort of a subset of CBD, there's one brand that has consistent rankings across all the keywords. And so this requires a little bit more research or an intuitive understanding of the space. But usually when I talk to brand owners, they know who those people are. They're like this doggone number, like one, they just have all these rankings and we don't know why. We just want to take them out. We want to take them down. And usually people have sort of an intuitive understanding of who it is. You can break it down by product line. You can break it down by location if you're a local business. But you normally have a sense of who are like the 1 to 2 websites in your space that have rankings across all of the keywords that you're kind of looking at.
Absolutely. And I'm just thinking about locally, the plumbers or the roofers who everybody knows their name because either they've been advertising forever or they've been in the community forever. And those might be the number one brands, the big gorillas. And then we find ourselves in that challenger role. So if we're self-aware enough to realize that we are in that challenger role, what can we do as a challenger brand? Or what do I need to do as a challenger brand that might be different from the vertical leader?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a couple of distinctions we could make here, but the most important is more focus, right? If you think about the comparison I like to make is between sort of a news anchor versus a barista at a local coffee shop, right? So if a news anchor gets on the air and they recommend a specific brand or type of coffee, probably a bunch of people are going to buy that kind of coffee just because this news anchor mentioned it. Maybe this news anchor has interviewed a couple of cool people and like knows something about coffee, but not really that much. The other option is you're going to go down the street and you're going to go to your neighborhood sort of mom and pop shop. It's the barista who also owns the coffee shop, and all he does is live, like breathe, eat coffee. And so coffee nerd knows all the flavors, the tasting notes. What do you like? What do you don't like? And then he'll give you a recommendation. So the difference between those two people is really the focus, right? The barista, all they're doing is coffee. In the news anchor, they're obviously sort of interviewing people for a bunch of different segments. So if you just have one area of focus and you get really focused both with your content, with your links, with your entire strategy, you can start to outrank some of these bigger players. And then you can just dominate one area, move on to the next, and be very methodical. And that can really play out well over the long term.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking of a client that I had years ago who was a small player here in Maine, and big player in terms of what they did. They sold conveyor belts, but
Cool.
what they were selling was also sold by basically the equivalent of Amazon, which was Granger. And it was the
Oh, yep.
idea of how could we possibly compete against Granger? Well, Granger does everything. You do this one thing, so let's narrowly focus on just that. So that, to your point, that's kind of like the perspective that we need to come to the table with, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, I actually have a mechanical engineering degree. So I know about Granger. They have like thousands and thousands of products. And yeah, exactly. So if all you are doing is talking about conveyor belts, you have the ability to market to people with very specific niche use cases, right? And like this is just this sort of mirrors the play that business is going to take. It's all custom. It's all built for you. We are more flexible. We're going to work with you when we come in and install it. You're going to be able to pick up the phone and call us, right? So now, because they're just so focused on the one area, they can afford to write content or approach SEO keywords for things like conveyor belts for a 2,000 square foot shop with X and Y equipment, right? So it's very long tail. Maybe you only get a few customers a month, but those few customers are really crucial for you. Whereas for Granger, they're like, that doesn't make a difference. 3 customers doesn't make a difference for us. So absolutely, that's actually a really good example.
Awesome. So I'm kind of curious about this. When you're talking to these challenger brands, how much of a therapist do you need to be with some of your clients? I mean, I have clients who wanted a website and they're like, I want a website like Amazon. And great, you have $100 million every year to spend on a website. Or
Yeah.
they wonder why they're not ranking first for a product that's also provided by some ginormous company that has money to throw behind it. How do you manage expectations and timelines when there's a Goliath in the vertical with your clients?
Well, I think the number one thing is absolutely, I act as a little bit of a therapist. I hear the troubles and I say, look, I empathize with you. And here are some examples of some other clients that have been in your same shoes. I think the number 2 thing, the second aspect here, is we just bring it all back to money. And so if you can bring it back to money and, hey, here's what you can get, here's what we can't get, here's some forecasting for what kind of return on investment you can expect. If you can bring it back to the data, you can sort of switch out of that mindset of, hey, I want this thing that XYZ has. Because I think founders sort of have both of those. Like founders that I talk to, they really love to rank for a keyword that they can sort of show off to their friends, right? They say, hey, we rank number 1 for diamond rings, right? Like this is super cool. But if you say, hey, the most profitable thing to do, instead of trying to rank for that huge keyword, is going to be to rank for these 5 longer tail keywords that are a little lower difficulty. And here's kind of the result that you're going to get from that. Here's the money that you're going to make because of that on a much quicker timeline. Then it all sort of falls into place and everybody gets on board pretty quickly, is what I find.
Nice. So once you've convinced me to check my ego and that I am a challenger brand here, what are some of the first things that a challenger brand should consider when it comes to their SEO? What do those first few steps look like?
Yeah. So, first thing I'm going to do is dig into the products that this person is selling, right? Like, what are your most profitable lines of business? And that can give us some clues as to where we should focus, right? So, for example, if you sell conveyor belts and you also sell, well, maybe conveyor belts isn't the best example because I don't even know what somebody who sells conveyor belts would also sell. Let's say you sell diamond rings and diamond necklaces, but diamond rings are by far your best seller and they are higher gross margin and everything is just better about that product line. It's like, okay, so let's focus on that area first. And from there, we start to build out the SEO strategy around that. And we can get very technical, we can get very deeper or not deep into that. But really, it's about analyzing the catalog and seeing, okay, first of all, I'll ask a series of questions. Which one has the best profit margins? Which one leads to repeat purchases? Which one leads to your best customers who come back again and again? Where are you most differentiated? And then you pick one product line and then you build the SEO strategy around it.
So just to make sure I'm understanding this, it sounds like it makes a lot of sense. Rather than trying to fix everything all at once, what we should be doing is figuring out where our best profit margin is or where our best opportunities is, and basically tackle SEO one vertical at a time rather than trying to do a half-assed job of everything.
Exactly. Yep. You got it 100%.
All right. So let's say that we decide we've got the industry or the subcategory that we want to focus our SEO intentions on. How do you, when you're working with your clients, find the right keywords or the content gaps and all those other elements to keep the ball rolling forward?
Yeah, well, so we have a whole sort of system that we use for this. It's really interesting. One thing that we have found over the last couple of years is that the types of keywords that you use on one page don't just influence that page, they influence others as well. So like a really interesting example is, I'm not going to give away the exact industry, but we had a client who was ranking for something in sort of the luxury space. Let's say diamond rings, again, to use that example. They had a sort of shopping page that they wanted to rank for the term diamond rings. Okay. And they were having some trouble. They couldn't quite get it to rank. And so we kind of just said, like, I guess we're just not going to rank this right now. But they brought us in to help with some other stuff, some other content. And we said, great, this is just sort of not on the table right now. However, we wrote 2 blog posts on the site that were about how much do diamond rings cost? And then where do you buy diamond rings? Sort of a breakdown of like mom and pop shop versus Amazon versus Costco, whatever. And when we wrote those 2 pieces of content, all of a sudden their collections page, their shopping page started ranking better for the target term. So what we're finding now is that there is this ecosystem effect where if you start to rank for all of these relevant questions that are relevant to the purchase journey, that all of your very short tail, very competitive keywords will start to rank better as well. So my guidance would be to rank for sort of bottom of the funnel terms. What are the questions that people are asking you right before they buy something? There's patterns. How much do things cost? Where do you buy them? Like, what should I expect to spend? What brands are the best? You can write about the different brands in your space. If there's a technical aspect to it, like if for diamond rings, it's the 5 C's or the 4 C's, excuse me. For conveyor belts, I'm sure there's other power things. So if you write about those sort of 5 areas, price, cost, how much do things cost? Where do you buy them? What types of products are the best, the brands, and then sort of technical. So I should say 4 things, sort of technical details of them. That's a really, really good starting point. And then we've just built on that over time. So like we have dozens of clients and we see what works for them and we test out these different theories and see what works. And I actually have a full list that I'm happy to give to your listeners, at the end that gives sort of our top 15 highest performing pieces of content that you should write on your site, right? And that's just all battle tested. It's just iterations. We've tested again and again and again and seen what works over time.
Yeah, we can include a link to that for sure. And I'll try and remember to ask you about it as we get to the end. And by the way, when it comes to conveyor belts, there are a lot of things. It's like, do you want the products to stay on a flat level? Is there an incline? Does this need to be food quality level? Do there need to be like little chevrons that hold things in place? And what's the temperature going to be like? Is it going to be indoor or outdoor? I learn a lot, as I'm sure you do, when you take on a client in a new industry. So yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about some of these nichier terms, these long-term keywords. What is your thought about a high difficulty word? Is it even worth pursuing, or is that something we just ignore completely?
Yeah, so I love this. And now we're getting into the nuances. How do you balance long-term with short-term? And so I'll actually talk about another client that we worked with. We kind of took them from 0 to they were ranking for the target term in their space, like the short tail term. And then they had a bunch of other ones that we're ranking for as well, sort of the longer tail ones that we talked about. What we do is we sort of set up the framework to rank for the big difficult keyword in the beginning, and then we just build around it over time. So we don't have it super well optimized. It doesn't have to be perfect. We just set up the basics. So in this case, if you're selling, I don't know, hiking boots, and you want to rank for the term hiking boots, you got to just go at Google hiking boots, see what kinds of pages generally are coming up, and then make sure you have the kind of page on your site. In this case, it's very likely going to be something like what people call a PLP or a collections page or a category page, where it's just a list of all your products. Okay, so you got to make sure that you have that page live on your site somewhere. You're going to have it generally optimized for hiking boots and the meta title, meta description, all that, sort of nerdy SEO stuff. You have a little bit of content at the bottom of the page, but you don't have to worry about making it perfect. And then over time, you're going to start to create this helpful content around it. And essentially, the rising tide will lift all boats. So then that page over time will start to rank better for those shorter tail terms as you're creating this content that's ranking for the longer tail terms around it. And then eventually, you're going to hit a point of momentum where Google sees your site as an authority in this space. And usually what we find is that it sort of feels like a slog, feels like a slog, feels like a slog. There's a breakthrough. And then all of a sudden, that collections page is really ranking very well for that high intent term. So you just set up the basics and then you go kind of focus on other things, let that marinate. And then over time, you'll reinforce your position and start to do really, really well.
And Josh, as you're building out all these blog post articles, resources, what is your official internal linking policy? Are you taking it that, the first time that you mentioned hiking boots on this article about how to choose the right hiking boot for a beginner trailblazer, whatever it is, are you linking that over to that collections page?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and something that we've actually changed a lot over the last year. Previously, we used to use a lot sort of 50-50 exact match anchor text. So exact match anchor text for the listeners is if you're trying to rank for hiking boots, you use the words hiking boots exactly for the internal link. In the last year, we've toned that down a lot, and we start to use less exact match. And so we just try and figure out, okay, does this link add context to the target page? Because what we found is that these internal links work as sort of votes of authority within your site to say, hey, this page is really important. Please rank it higher. But it also adds context. So if you use the word best hiking boots in the rain, and you link back to this page, well, that's telling Google that this page is also about the rain. So basically what you want to do is keep it natural. Yeah, if you have a very high importance page, for example, that collections page that we were talking about, in every article that you write, I would link back to it in every relevant article. If they're on the topic of hiking boots, if you write something else about sandals or something, don't link back to that one because you kind of want to maintain the consistency of the topic. But link to it in the first third, but just use some anchor text that sort of feels natural and is relevant to the previous page, because we find that added context over time helps Google better understand what that original page is. And that leads to better rankings, especially now with AI and machine learning and all that kind of stuff.
When you've done this keyword research, and it sounds like your first thing might be to optimize blog posts as a category, how do you kind of find the balance between the blog posts, between the category pages, and then even the individual product pages when it comes to using this? Is there a set thing, or is it more just by feel on how much you want to optimize those three given categories of pages?
Yeah, so we're pretty page type agnostic. What we do is we pick a set of keywords that we know are going to have some purchase intent, and then we optimize around those whatever pages are required. So we'll say, okay, we have a conversation with the founder, we had a conversation, and we say, okay, the term that you want to rank for is, I don't know, nicotine-free vapes. Cool. What kind of page is ranking for nicotine-free vapes? It's a collection. Great. Here are some other terms that are around that are really important, that are high intent. Okay, what kinds of what kind of pages are ranking for those terms? How much do they cost? That's a blog post. What are the ingredients? What are the harmful ingredients? That's another blog post. Somebody looking for a specific size, a 200 puff no nicotine vape. That's important as well. That's a longer tail variation. Oh, that's actually a product page. And then we assign that to a product page. So it's really about mapping the most important, most valuable keywords first, and then creating whatever page we need to sort of support that strategy.
That makes sense. It seems to me like there's been a lot of articles lately in blog posts and podcasts about the importance of brand when it comes to SEO. Do you feel that brand is important to the idea of the challenger brands when it comes to SEO, or is that something we should just de-emphasize as we're on this journey?
So that's a loaded question, because brand is very important.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Brand is critical. And so one of the things that we've seen, especially over the last year, is that brand search correlates with your overall SEO profile. And so how do we make that less SEO nerdy talk, right? Basically, if a bunch of people are Googling your brand every month, Google is more likely to show you in search results because they know that people already want your stuff and they like you. So for example, if people are searching for Lululemon yoga pants, Google's going to rank Lululemons for yoga pants without their brand name attached to it a lot more easily because they know that people like those yoga pants. So as a challenger brand, one of the drawbacks is you come into an industry, sometimes you don't actually have as much of that brand equity built up. Okay. And so there's a couple of things you can do. One, we find pretty strong correlations between running paid advertising and brand searches. So if you want to increase your paid advertising, that actually can help your SEO quite a bit. The other thing is you just have to build the topical authority again. So we're talking about that content. You build that content ecosystem that actually helps offset some of the power of that brand building. Okay. So yes, brand is important. Typically, if you're a challenger brand, that's not going to be your strength though. And so we're going to focus on other areas, kind of like the content ecosystem. That's why I talk about content so much, is because it's sort of your trump card. If you can do better at content than anybody else in one vertical, you can overcome a lot of these other challenges.
And when do you find, is there a tipping point where you're like, we have saturated vertical 1, it's now time to start going after vertical 2? Do you have some sort of rubric that helps you talk to your clients about, like, let's go after walking shoes and not just hiking boots anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of it is just rankings based, revenue based, right? Like if we have one existing vertical and it's doing very well and we're sort of ranking for most of the top terms in the space, I would say once we get to a majority where we say, here's a list of, the top 100 keywords in this space and where we're ranking for them, and you're ranking for in the top, I don't know, say top 5 for 50 to 60% of those keywords, we say, okay, now let's have a conversation about expanding into another area, because you're always going to be maintaining, you're always going to be working on the existing sort of ecosystems that you've built. And so if you putting some like resources into that ecosystem, it's going to keep slowly growing over time, and maybe it's not worth it to invest the same amount. And those resources would be better used by going after something completely different. So instead of increasing by 2 or 3 times a month, or 2 or 3% per month, you can say, hey, we're going to attack an entirely new angle, and we're going to increase our revenue by 20% or 30%. And so it's just a matter of balancing that out. And those are conversations we have often. But usually the tipping point comes when I'd say 50 to 60% of those keywords that you're targeting, you're ranking pretty well. And okay, we're authorities in this space.
All right. How much content do you feel that we should be creating as a challenger brand, and or how frequently should we be updating or adding content to our website?
Absolutely. So great question. I would say for competitive verticals, CBD, any vaping, anything like that, similar verticals. I'd say the outdoor space is pretty competitive too, like lawyers, anything like that. I'd say more is better. I'd say between 6 and 8 pieces of content a month is a really good starting point. Yeah. If you're a smaller brand, I still recommend trying to get at least once per week, publish something new once a week. So something like 4 pieces a month is a really good starting point. So my base that I recommend to clients is 4 per month. If you're in any sort of competitive environment, I'd say bump that up to 6. And if you're like, no, we definitely know we're in sort of that really competitive space, bump it up to 8. So yeah, definitely a little bit on the higher end.
That does seem very high to me. And I often think of there being a critical mass. So if a new website, or a website that never really had a lot of content on it, I think you should be writing pretty regularly. If you can get 4 quality blog posts out a month, God bless you, and take care of that.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel like there becomes, okay, we've got a critical mass at this point? Or is that again a question of take a look at the metrics, take a look at your traffic, take a look at your conversions, and your analytics will tell you when it's time that you can maybe take your foot off the gas or focus on another part of your business?
Yeah, I'd say the analytics will tell you, right? And again, we come back to the rankings, right? If you're ranking for a lot of that stuff that you'd like to rank for, then you can probably take your foot off the gas a little bit. I would say usually the resources that are required to maintain an ecosystem are about half, maybe a little bit less of the resources that were required to build it. So like, let's say that you want to post 8 pieces a month because you're in a really competitive space. Okay, you do that for maybe a year, you're going to be in a pretty solid spot. You're still going to want to have maybe 3 to 4 articles a month set aside for updating those existing pieces, right? Like 8 pieces a month for 12 months is, what is that, 96 pieces of content? A small percentage of those, 4% of those, are going to be out of date or need updating at any point in time. So
Sure.
At some point, you're going to be able to take your foot off the gas, but not completely. Okay. And so does that answer your question? I feel like there was a couple of different.
No, I think it's just, yeah, there's when can you take your foot off the gas, or when do you want to shift? And I definitely think you've answered that. I feel like there's even more that we could have talked about, because I know that you and I in a previous conversation also talked about the role of video and also got more into link building. For people who want to learn more from you, where can we send them online?
Absolutely. So the place where I'll give away sort of some of the free resources is trafficlighttracking.com. I give away, there's a whole series around attribution, SEO attribution, and we get into that. I'll also give you that keyword list that I talked about. If you enter your email there, trafficlighttracking.com is a great place to go. Otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn. A lot of people, I've been engaging with people on LinkedIn. So I'd say just look me up on LinkedIn. We can include a link to that in the show notes, I hope, right?
Absolutely.
And then so those are probably the 2 best places to go.
Perfect. Josh, this has been fantastic, very eye-opening, and just thanks for coming by and sharing your expertise.
Thanks, Rich. Appreciate it.
Okay, I hope you're ready to take on the big dogs, the Goliaths, the top brands in your industry after listening to today's conversation. If you missed anything, if you need a refresher, don't worry, we got it all taken care of for you. Just head on over to theagentsofchange.com/554. You'll find a blog post, show notes, transcript, and all the links that Josh shared with us, all available and ready for you. And while you're at the site, be sure to check out all the information about the upcoming 10th Annual Agents of Change Digital Marketing Conference and reserve your spot while there's still time. And finally, just a favor, if you know a friend who's struggling with marketing or web design or generating more business online, do us all a favor and introduce them to the show. I'm sure they'll enjoy it. You'll obviously be the hero of this story, and we get to discover a new listener. Whatever you end up doing, try something new this week so that you can be an agent of change.
Don't miss another thrilling episode of the Agents of Change podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform.